you won over 70% of your games everywhere you coached, at the high school level, at the Division II level, at the Division I level. Uh, when you look back on your career, what are you proudest of?
I think one of the things I'm proudest of is perhaps having established a basic concept of how we're going to live without any kind of opposition in my mind about what I really believed in. And the teaching aspect of it. I received the best teacher in the state of Pennsylvania in 1979, I think, right after we won the national championship.
Mm-hmm. At Cheney State?
At Cheney State.
Yes.
All of my players had graduated, and Governor Thornburg presented me with an award at that time. I think it was about $10,000 for being the best teacher in the state. And then in '82, I went to Temple. I think it was '82, and stayed there for 24 years, where a lot of coaches were in and out of there. Having respect for the person that chose me to come there, and I received the best teacher award also there. Mm-hmm. So I think that was worth another $7,000 or $8,000. But
now I know how you're dressing so good.
No, I dress with good clothes, but I look like a dog in them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not worried about that. It's just that I want to feel good. But it's amazing you asked that question. But I think that having been a part of the coaching aspect of life and been around with great people, you, Nolan, and Big John, and Vivian Stringer, who's also a Hall of Famer. Nolan should be in the Hall of Fame.
No question about it.
In my opinion. And I think that kind of cadre of people, having been around them, you can't help but grow, and you can't help but have hope in a world where I just think that so many things have gone wrong in this country and in the world. It's a darn shame that the formula for success has been shredded into so many pieces that you better pick up some common denominator that you can exist with some light that says there's hope. And I just think that I've been able to do that. But those are three things that I'm truly proud of. Those the fact that, when we talk about teaching and the kind of camaraderie that you must have, the kind of associations that lead to success. You can't do it by yourself. And I hear so many times coaches who often people bragging about that's a father and a great teacher and all this. And yet we find people like Petey Carrill, Big House Gaines, and all these people who were down to earth. In fact, I was just with Petey at Speedy Marsh's, who's an icon in this city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was at his game this past week and found that Speedy is still, Petey, we sitting behind the bench, and he's hitting me when the game's going on. Every time something comes up, especially turnovers, you can't turn the ball over. That's me. That's the life
we
that
want to talk about. That's what's going to be the next thing I was going to talk about.
They didn't even have it on a stat sheet when I invented that.
John, talk to us about that, because one of the many outstanding achievements you realized during your coaching career was that your teams were known for not turning the basketball over. How were you able to instill in the minds of your players the value of the possession of the ball?
When we go back to Cheney State, I can remember Vivian and I used to meet before we go. We only had a small gym, No
Vivian
bigger.
Stringer was this coach, was a women's coach at
That's
James
right.
State. Right. Okay.
And she and I would meet before we go to the floor. We had to practice and devise ways and means that we could utilize that small facility at the optimum. At a point in time when women were fighting against men before Prop 48, before Title IX came into being. And we would sit down and talk, and we would come up with how we're going to have the boys and girls mixed together and practice together, and how we could establish rules which govern your play, which govern your practice sessions. And I would always ask this question: how can we measure success? How can you measure winning? How can you measure the fact that you're going to be successful? There is no objective way. There is none. Most of it is all subjective. Get great players and throw them out there. I was a gym teacher and I knew this. You could do this. You could experiment with this if you want to. Take a gym of 100 people, say at junior high school many, many years ago where I taught. We would have, before we blow the whistle to start a formal session of teaching, we would find that as you looked around the gym at all the baskets, every day, the same guys would be at the same basket. You know this yourself, George. We can go to any schoolyard, and you try this, and you will find that if there's 3 or 4 different courts, the better players will congregate on that same court every day. Every day. And the players that are not so talented, they're not there on that. They're on the other courts. In a gym class, the same thing. They seem to gravitate to that court, and nobody interfered with them. Things have changed now. But during those days, if you thought about it, you'd say, well, how can we measure success from any individual, irrespective of him being a great player or a talented player or whatever? And we sat down, Vivian and I, day by day, and we put it together. It's called my turnover chart. I don't have it with me. I may have given one to this guy here in the center, but it measures things that you would think is not so, well, shooting, scoring baskets. It doesn't measure that. It measures pivot efficiency, not whether if you got a good shot and you missed it, you could mark it up to a point of +5. You could give that guy +5 because he did all the proper thing. He dropped if he was on this side of the pivot, he dropped this foot so he could look middle and see the entire court. If he dropped this foot, he's always looking away and finds himself having to pivot back. But you should always, at all times, see the court. It's not one of those Elijah Wan shots where he turn and shoot the basket this way to his right side. You know what I'm saying? He couldn't see. That's eye basketball, we would call it. Then we could also measure taking a charge, staying on your feet, always saying you can do more if you stay on the floor. Learning that from Larry Bird, who found himself on the floor more times. Very seldom was he injured in any game because he wasn't always jumping. Positioning on rebound. You wrote up a nice chart, which I have right now in my booklet. I stole it from you. On rebounding, the outlet pass, making sure that you get a point guard to crack back to the ball and not having guys outlet the ball like that. Because everybody don't have a Wes Unseld who could catch that and shoot that pass out there. Everybody don't have that. So we had to devise a turnover chart. And we would use things that's negative, like missing layups was a negative. And we would have minutes played so you could see how many turnovers a guy came up with. And I was the ultimate judge. Because when we would read the chart out at the end, if the manager did it, the other players would chase him around and beat him up. Because they said that he was cheating them. So I'm the ultimate. And you better not touch the manager, because I'm saying that's a turnover in practice. We started in practice. So they developed that kind of concept. And then we looked at John Wooden when he talked about angles, proper angles. If you're going to make passes 180 degrees over here, this way, you got problems. You must always put yourself in a position where there's triangles on the court at all times. And there's a push and pull effect. If I'm dribbling toward you, I'm pushing you. If I'm dribbling away from you, I'm pulling you. So that we almost stayed equidistant. If you run a three-guard offense, which John McClendon devised a little booklet, I swear to God, I wish I could find that little booklet, of a three-guard set. That's how he started, with proper spacing. When I hired Dean Demopoulos, I had him in the stands because the people got pissed off at him sitting on the bench. So he would be in the stands hollering, spacing, spacing, and his ass is out there now with the LA Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But we did that. Also, we felt that you get your, and this is, I don't want to continue to carry on without you seeing that chart. We constantly made it very clear that you get your offensive and defensive balance. When I got the ball, I want to make sure that we have defensive balance, regardless who's shooting. I don't want to send 5 guys to the basket and one guy leaks out and they end up like that year when Denver was beaten the daylights by the LA Lakers, when they got fast breaks because here outside Calvin Nat, who couldn't shoot a lick, is shooting jump shots outside. Who was a rebounder on that team? Fat Lever, the little guy. Mm-hmm. The best shooter was another guy by who was that, English or somebody that was, and then
Alex
they had
English.
Alex
English.
He was a great player, and now you got Issel out there shooting jump shots, and Magic and them is leaking out. Somebody would take it out and just throw it over them, and they had 9 wolf dunks in that game. And I would use that with Vivian at times to tell, now she's changed a lot now because she's getting talented players. But at that time, I always reduce it to the fact, how can you exist on a basketball court if you didn't work hard at angles and passing and receiving? I looked at Bobby Knight, who had some couple drills. One of the drills was wrong pass, bad passing drill. That meant you had to move your feet. You couldn't get settled in here, and if the pass was thrown there, you didn't move your feet to get it. So you always had to learn how to move your feet. John Wooden talked all day long up at Robert Morris College. When we started out, we had about 300 people, 300 coaches in there. And everybody had their little books waiting for the magic portion. And he had a little tablet in the back of his pocket. And he walked around and talked about being on the balls of your feet. Being on the balls of your feet. This is how he started off. Balance. Even his pyramid was considered a pyramid of balance that he listed. But on the basketball court, he taught it also. And he was saying on day one, practice, we started here, talking about Walton coming with a beard on and sent him out of practice. They had that big discussion. But he talked about being on the balls of your feet. Now, they dismissed us for lunch. How many people came back? About 35 or 40. The other coaches left. This was up at Robert Morris College. Mm-hmm. I remember that because Jim Maloney and I went up there. My uncle, God rest his soul, he passed away. You worked with Jim,
Yeah, I worked with Jim. Jim and I were lefties, assistant at
Absolutely. And the thing about it is that I learned so much. But you only have to go to a clinic to pick up just a few things to add to your philosophy. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started out with the greatest thing that you can learn to do on a basketball court is ownership of that basketball. Protect it. Become efficient and proficient at every trip down the floor. Get something out of it. When you made empty trips down the floor, and I looked at the shooting chart, and it says that this team got 80 shots or 60 shots, and we had 80 possessions, and you only got 6. What the hell happened to the other 20 times you possessed the ball? That was important to me. So we had to discover what happened as we look at our tapes, as we look at things that happen in a basketball game where you make empty trips. We based our philosophy based on that. And Vivian ended up in the Final Four the same year we won the national championship. Unbelievable. Because of one reason. We were following a narrative which says no turnovers. We led the country every year I was at Temple, but 3 times with 10 or below turnovers. If you can average somewhere around, you got a chance. A blind man ain't got no business at the circus, because he ain't gonna see a damn thing. But a blind man has a chance. Even if he come down and shoot the ball every time, he got a chance. You see. So I based it all, my philosophy was based on no turnovers. And it still is. I look at a basketball game now, and I see teams throwing the ball away, I just cut them off. I talked to Doug Collins here with the 76ers. They got great offensive players, great shooters. And they don't turn the ball over. That's why they're winning.